It is necessary to begin with the Nile River if one wishes to acquire an understanding of Egyptian popular mythology. No other option is available. Although it was merely a river, the Nile served as the beating heart that pumped life into an entire empire. Imagine that there is a country that is essentially a green and fertile line that is surrounded by two enormous deserts that are unrelenting. The gift of the Nile arrived in the form of that verdant haven of life, that Oasis. That is, for the ancient Egyptians, Mat, the fundamental concept of order, truth, justice, and cosmic balance, was expressed in the form of the Nile, which was the physical embodiment of Mayat. The rising of the sun, the movement of the stars, and most importantly, the overflowing of the Nile were all caused by Mat. Life depended on that annual flood, an event that was so foreseeable and significant that it became the foundation of their calendar as well as their religion. The river would start to rise around the month of July each and every year. They did not show any fear. Rather, they rejoiced in it. They were aware that those waters, which were loaded with a dark silt that was rich in nutrients, would work to fertilize the land. When the waters subsided after months of flooding, they found that they had left behind a layer of soil that was so rich in nutrients that it was almost magical. It was because of the remarkable growth of the crops that they referred to the black soil as Qemet, which literally translates to the black land. This is where the name Egypt originates from for the people who lived there. You came across the desert, which is defined as a red desert. Isfet, chaos, and disintegration were all represented by the desert. On the other hand, there were sandstorms, scorpions, and snakes that were poisonous that lived there. Ifeth was the complete antithesis of Mat that he was. Over the course of the Nile's creation, the desert was destroyed. When compared to the desert, the Nile represented life. The purpose of constructing cemeteries on the outskirts of the desert was to provide a place for the deceased to rest in the red earth, away from the world of the living, which was related to the Nile. The contrast between the green strip and the red desert is something that can be found throughout the entirety of Egyptian mythology and the Egyptian way of life. They did not consider the ongoing conflict between order and chaos to be a theoretical concept. Rather, it was something that they witnessed on a daily basis in their own environment. From the perspective of the Egyptians, the riverbanks were not the end of the world. There was a river in the heavens that the gods also traveled down in their boats, and the Nile was the earthly reflection of that river. In a journey that lasted forever, Ra, the god of the sun, traveled through the underworld at night and across the sky in his solar bark during the day. This journey was a reflection of the sun's daily cycle and, by extension, the annual flood cycle. Not only did the flood supply them with food, but they also served as a tangible reminder that the cosmic order was being preserved. In the event that the Nile did not overwhelm, it indicated that Maat had become less powerful and that Chaos was gaining ground. It was a matter of life and death. When you think of Egyptian mythology, you shouldn't just picture gods and pharaohs from that perspective. Think about the thick black mud that is on your feet, the Nile River that is overflowing, and the ever-present danger that the desert poses. There was a connection between everything they did and everything they believed, and that river. Rather than merely being a resource, the Nile was the god who ensured their continued existence. The ancient Egyptians did not consider the world to be a finished product. It was not comparable to a piece of pottery that is molded once and then allowed to dry. The act of creation was seen by them as a dynamic and cyclical process that underwent continuous repetition. It is essential to comprehend this idea in order to comprehend their entire worldview and mythology. The solar cycle is the most illustrative example of this phenomenon. Ra, the god of the sun, was reborn on the eastern horizon upon the beginning of each day. It was not merely the motion of a star that comprised his journey across the sky. Rather, it was a new act of creation, a reaffirmation of the superiority of cosmic order over chaos. In the evening, when Ra had set in the western direction, he entered the underworld, which was known as the Duat. There he confronted the forces of darkness, and in particular, the serpent of Chaos, Apophis. Every night, Ra triumphed over Apophis, which made it possible for the sun to be reborn the following morning through his efforts. It was a never-ending struggle that demonstrated that life and order were not a gift that could be taken for granted, but rather something that needed to be fought for in order to be preserved. In a similar manner, the cycle of the Nile was a yearly repetition of the process of original creation. It is common knowledge that the Nile overflowed every year, bringing with it a rich silt that revitalized the land surrounding it. This flood was not merely a natural occurrence in the eyes of the Egyptians. Rather, it was a reenactment of the first time the earth emerged from the primordial waters of the Nun. The emergence of fertile land following the flood was a reflection of the initial creation that had taken place. As the first earth, also known as the Ben, emerged from the chaos of the watery environment. This way of thinking permeated any and all aspects of his life. For instance, the pharaoh was not only a king, but also the personification of Horus, the god of order. He was the source of all order. Through each and every ritual, each and every temple construction, and each and every offering to the gods, his primary responsibility was to ensure that Ma'at, the cosmic balance, was preserved. This was an act that was performed in order to work together with the cycle of creation, to assist the gods in maintaining the order of the world and to prevent it from reverting back to the chaos that existed in Lisfit. They believed that ritual and action were the means by which one could exert influence over the universe, and they did not believe in chance. Through the rites that they performed, the priests and temples were like cosmic engineers who made sure that the sun rose, the Nile flooded, and life continued on. At the end of the day, the Egyptian mind viewed the world as a fragile place that required constant attention. The act of creation was not a one-time, far-off occurrence. Rather, it was a miracle that was repeated with each time the sun rose and the floods occurred, in addition to instilling in them a profound reverence for the natural cycles, which were, in essence, the cycles of life itself. This provided them with a sense of purpose. The Nun, the primordial ocean, was the only thing that existed in the beginning. It was an infinite abyss filling with chaotic waters. It was a state that existed before existence, characterized by nothingness, chaos, and complete darkness. That inert mass was the source from which the god Saturn emerged on his own. It is not true that he was born, nor was he created. Rather, he simply emerged from the waters of the Nun, which were located on a hill that was known as the Benben. He is established as the first being and the origin of everything that exists as a result of this act of self-creation. When Atum was by himself in the vastness, he experienced the urge to create. The first pair of gods, Shu and Tefnut, were created by him through a solitary act of masturbation, or in some versions, by spitting or sneezing. Additionally, he gave birth to them. You can think of them as the first dualities in the cosmos. The air and the void, as well as the vital space, were representations of Shu. For her part, Tefnut was a mixture of moisture and dew, the liquid that is necessary for life to continue. Atum participated in the process of creating his children, who would later be carried away by the Nun. The agony that Atum felt at the thought of losing them caused him to tear out one of his eyes and send it out to search for them. After they had returned, the sun god shed tears of happiness, and from those tears, the first human beings emerged into existence. As a result, Shu and Tefnut were blessed with 2 offspring. The god of the earth is known as Geb. The goddess of the sky is known as Inut. In addition to being head over heels in love with one another, Geb and Nut were constantly embracing one another, bringing together the heavens and the earth in a continuous embrace. On the other hand, the fact that they were together rendered it impossible for the world to exist because there was no room for life. The separation was ordered by Atum, who did so through his son Shu. After positioning himself between Nut and Geb, Shu lifted Nut above his head, thereby creating space between the two of them. The moment when the earth and the sky were separated is considered to be one of the most iconic moments in Egyptian mythology. It was through this division that the universe began to take shape, and it was between the earth of Geb and the air of Shu that the world that provided a home for humans was established. Despite the fact that they were no longer together, Geb and Nut were able to have 4 children: Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. This is the next part of the myth. The Ened of Heliopolis is a fundamental group of deities that represents the fundamental structure of creation and life in the Egyptian universe. It is comprised of 9 gods: Atum, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Osiris, Isis, and Seth. Nephthys is also a member of this group. This particular cosmogony, which has its roots in the city of Heliopolis, also known as the City of the Sun, explains that the universe was created by the sun itself through an act of self-creation. In this particular myth, the origin is the sun itself, which is an active, generative force that provides the universe with life, order, and purpose. This is in contrast to other myths that center on primordial chaos or the existence of the Word. Each of the gods of the Ened is responsible for a distinct function, which includes the construction of the world in stages, beginning with the formation of the elements and culminating in the establishment of the divine family that would rule the earth. Let us now forget everything that we have said about the sun and the concept of self-creation, because the version that was published in Hermopolitan is entirely different. As per this myth, the beginning of the universe is not order, but rather complete and utter chaos. A group of 8 primordial gods who existed in complete chaos prior to the creation of the world gave birth to the world when they were created. Lada is comprised of 8 gods, 4 of whom are male and have frog heads, and 4 of whom are female and have snake heads. There was a primordial chaos that existed before things took shape, and each pair of Lada represents a different aspect of that chaos. Nun and Nonet were the water that existed prehistorically. They were the vastness of the abyssal ocean, the liquid nothingness from which everything emerged. They were the ultimate source of everything. They can be thought of as the engine and fuel that drives chaos. The Hu. There was no limit to Jawhet. They exemplified the absence of boundaries and definition that prevailed in the Prection, as well as the limitless space that they represented. Darkness, the absence of light, blindness, and the absence of all perception were the characteristics that Cook and Coquet embraced. Before dawn, it was the night before dawn. The concealed air, the unfathomable mystery, was represented by Ammon and Amunet. They were symbolic of the power of creation that had not yet expressed itself, the dormant force that would eventually be the driving force behind change. It was not through an act of will that the Ogdoad began to create. Rather, it was through the interaction of its own chaotic elements. Imagine these 8 gods moving and colliding with one another in a dance that is both out of control and completely illogical. Something unexpected transpired as a result of this disorder, which was characterized by the presence of darkness, water, air, and infinity. As a result of its agitation, a hill known as Ben emerged, and a cosmic egg materialized on top of it. There were some versions in which the thing that emerged was a lotus flower rather than an egg. The sun god Ra was contained within either this egg or this flower. The primordial darkness was flooded with light as a result of Ra's resurrection. The power of the sun god's energy was so great that it brought an end to the chows that had appeared. After accomplishing their mission, the 8 gods of Yada retreated to the realm of the dead in order to establish a state of order. According to some versions of events, they are the ones who are accountable for the rebirth of the sun every morning, which guarantees that the process of creation will proceed as planned. This myth, known as the Dermopolis, takes chows as the source of everything rather than the will of a god as the origin of everything. Rather than being the result of a deliberate act, creation was the unavoidable consequence of the collision of primordial forces. Compared to the view of Heliopolis, in which the act of creation was an expression of one's own free will, this one is more philosophical and, in some ways, more abstract. In and of itself, chows is not a negative thing. Rather, it is the essential force that, when it is organized, gives rise to the universe. Therefore, the world does not originate from an idea. Rather, it is the result of the agitation of nothingness. Memphite cosmogony presents a much more abstract and sophisticated vision of creation than the myths of Heliopolis and Hermopolis, which focus on physical acts such as self-creation or primordial chows. In contrast, the myths of Hermopolis and Heliopolis emphasize the importance of physical acts. In this place, the god who created everything does not come out of a chaotic ocean, nor does he sneeze his children into existence. The god Ta is said to have created the world through the use of his intellect and the word in this theology. The Shabaka stone is an ancient artifact that contains a transcription of an even older text. It is on this stone that the story of how Memphis came to be is written. According to this interpretation, Pdite is the supreme creator and the source of everything that exists. The Ogdoad of Hermopolis and the Ened of Heliopolis are 2 examples of the other gods that are considered to be manifestations of Ptah. The elevation of Apta to a position of supremacy over all other deities is a significant theological shift. It is the method by which Pt was developed that distinguishes him from other people. In ancient Egyptian culture, the heart was considered to be the seat of intellect and thought. According to the myth, Ptah was the first person to conceive of the universe in his heart. After the concept of the world had become crystal clear in his mind, he expresses it through the use of his tongue. The essence of the matter is that he stretched the universe and then gave it a name, and by giving it a name, he brought forth the universe. The text that is engraved on the Shabaka stone provides a concise summary of the concept, which states that everything that came forth from him. PT was conceived in the heart and ordered by the tongue. This cosmogony is remarkable for the level of abstraction that it possesses. The Greek and Western philosophical concepts that hold that creation originates from a logos, a word, or a rational principle were not developed until centuries after this idea was first proposed. This is a well-known phrase that can be found in the Bible. This concept is echoed by the fact that the word was present in the beginning. The priests of Memphis had already conceived of an immaterial and abstract principle, which they referred to as the divine mind and word, while the Greeks, such as the pre-Socratic philosophers, were looking for a material origin for the universe. As a result, it is not a God who is responsible for shaping the world with his hands. Rather, it is a God who conceives of the world and calls it into existence. As the creator of the universe, he is the architect. It was not for nothing that he was revered as the patron saint of craftspeople and men who worked in construction. The idea that true creation is not merely a physical act, but rather an intellectual process, is reflected in his act of creation through the use of thought and communication. In this theology, the figure of Ptah is elevated from that of a local god of Memphis to that of a universal deity, the source of existence and order itself. This is a concept that was truly advanced with regard to its time. As far as the ancient Egyptians were concerned, the sun was more than just a fiery ball in the sky. In addition to being the supreme monarch, he was the god Ra who embodied organization and life. The most significant occurrence in the universe was the journey that he took every day, an unending cycle consisting of birth, death, and rebirth without end. It was on the eastern horizon that the day started. After emerging from the primordial waters of the Nun, Ra appeared in his sacred scarab form, which was known as Khepri. In order to lay its eggs, the scarab beetle, which is characterized by pushing a ball of dung, was the ideal representation of the sun rising above the horizon. Khepri was a symbol of the dawn, youth, and hope that came with the beginning of a new day. As the sun reached its highest point, the god assumed his most well-known and powerful form, which was Ra, the sun that shines during the middle of the day. A procession of gods accompanied the god as he traversed the sky in his solar bark, which was the bark of the day. At this point, the god was traveling through the sky. Ra was the ruler of this vessel, and he was responsible for preserving the order of the universe and shedding light on the world of the living. The sun finally descended below the western horizon at sunset, transforming into Atum, the setting sun. This occurred at the exact moment, as it was getting ready to pass away and enter the dangerous underworld known as the Dud. Atum was the manifestation of the sun as it was getting older. In the course of the journey through the Dud, there were many perils, demons, and battles to be encountered. The nightly journey of Ra was broken up into 12 hours, each of which had its own significance and difficulty, as described in funerary texts such as the Book of the Dead. The first, the Dud, is entered by Ra. Currently, he is in a state of transitioning into the realm of the dead. The time is Tui Thur. Throughout the Dud, Ra makes his way through the watery regions. The underground rivers are teeming with guardians and obstacles of various kinds. 4 o'clock. The region of the tumuli, which is where the tombs of the deceased are situated, is where the sun god makes his appearance. 5 o'clock. While Rana is sailing through the realm of Sokar, which is a sandy and desolate region, the gods are required to drag the boat through the region. 6 o'clock. Currently, we are at midnight, which is the lowest point of the journey. During his transformation into a ram, refuses his body with that of Osiris, the god of the afterlife. This union was essential because it made it possible for Ra to be replenished and for Osiris to be symbolically resurrected. It also brought together the cycle of life and death with the cycle of the sun. 7 o'clock, the fight against Apophis to be exact. Now is the most important time of the day. Rano would have triumphed over the Chow serpent. There would be no dawn, and the world would be plunged into darkness that would last forever. From Team N to Monon Zan Aim, the sun god continues his ascent, traversing the final regions of the underworld, going through fire and contending with other demons along the way. It is 12 miles. After being reborn as Khepri, Re emerges from the Dot on the eastern horizon. Khepri is filled with vitality and youthfulness. The victorious serpent is expelled from the body, and the cycle starts all over again. Ra's struggle against the serpent of Chows, the fight against Apophis, also known as the battle. It's not just a story. Apophis was real. He was the most important figure in Egyptian mythology and a real-life representation of the people who lived during that time period. Order, the Ra. Apophis, the Chows, was something that Matt had to fight every night. This enormous serpent, known as Isfet, lived in the underground waters of the Duat. Its sole objective was to consume the sun and plunge the entire universe into a state of perpetual darkness. There was more to the conflict than just a physical struggle. It was also a battle on a metaphysical level. In the modern sense, Apophis was not a malevolent being. He was the embodiment of disorder and anti-creation in its purest form. Since there is no possibility of order existing in the absence of Chaos, his existence was just as essential as Re's. On the other hand, his power needed to be restrained. The light of the sun would be extinguished for all time if Apophis were to emerge victorious. The Egyptians did not sit idly by as Ra made his nightly journey. Rather, they actively assisted him. It was their struggle that Ra was going through, and his survival was dependent on their assistance. For the purpose of ensuring that the sun god would emerge victorious, the priests in the temples carried out elaborate rituals. During these rituals, spells and curses were repeatedly recited by the participants. It was recited that passages from the Book of Amduat and other funerary texts contained magical formulas that were intended to weaken Apophis and strengthen Ra during the ceremony. The priests joined the deities that were accompanying Ra, such as Set, who, for some reason, was a god of Chows, but in this context defended Ra, Thoth, and Maat in the symbolic battle, which consisted of rituals of destruction. As part of certain rituals, priests would fashion effigies of Apophis out of wax or papyrus, and then they would symbolically destroy them by destroying them with spears, knives, or fire, in order to symbolize the serpent's defeat, which was symbolized by the burning of the book of Apophis's revolt. Images of the serpent were sometimes painted on papyri or on the walls of tombs, and then they were either erased or mutilated. The temples were the only places where this text was kept, and it contained curses and spells that were intended to destroy the serpent. The papyrus, which represented the destruction of evil, was burned at the end of the ritual, which was the culmination of the ritual. Not only were these rituals performed in temples all over Egypt, but they were also more than just a theatrical performance. The Egyptians believed that these ritualistic acts of magic had a significant influence on the universe, and they performed them. Through their efforts, They made certain that Ra's bark would be able to sail without being consumed, and that the cycle of life would take place. Every morning's dawn served as a reminder of their accomplishments and a cause for celebration. The ever-present danger of darkness was not something that frightened them. Rather, it was something that provided them with a sense of purpose, a reason to fight for order in a world that was perpetually on the verge of anarchy. Ra had matured into an adult god over the course of time. At the same time that the Sun King was getting older on Earth, the ungrateful humans started plotting against him and speaking ill of his rule. Ra was so incensed by this betrayal that he gathered the other gods, including his own father Nun, to consult with them for guidance. For the purpose of punishing the rebels, he was instructed to send his eye, which is a manifestation of his power. When Ra removed his eye, it transformed into the form of Hathor, the goddess, who was then Ra's daughter. However, Ra's rage was so intense that Hathor morphed into a much more terrifying creature, the goddess Sekhmet, who had the head of a lion and whose name means the powerful seat. Sekhmet embodied the sun's most ferocious and destructive side, and she descended to Earth. Her mission was straightforward: to wipe out all of humanity. The human race initially failed to recognize the error that they had committed. The thirst that Sekhmet was experiencing led her to begin slaughtering them by the thousands. A torrent of rage, whose breath was a desert, and whose gaze could wither life, are all descriptions of her that can be found in ancient texts. The gods gazed down at her with a horrified expression. After seeing the massacre, Ra couldn't help but feel regret for his choice. It was impossible to maintain control of the punishment. In the event that it persisted, there would be no more people on the planet. Sekhmet, completely intoxicated by the slaughter, was unable to hear Ra's command for the goddess to stop what she was doing. Ra conceived of a scheme in order to save humanity. He gave his servants the task of preparing a massive quantity of beer that had been colored with red ochre to give the appearance of blood. It is said that the earth poured out the mixture in such large quantities that it immediately filled the plains. The mixture was distributed by the earth. After seeing the red liquid, Sekhmet assumed that it was the blood of the people she had killed. As soon as she felt thirsty, she started drinking a lot. She drank so much that she became intoxicated and fell asleep, after which she reverted to her original form, which was that of the lovely Hathor. There was no longer any thirst in him when he awoke. A divine deception and a monumental drunken spree were responsible for humanity's miraculous survival, which had been saved by the skin of its teeth. The purpose of this myth is to acknowledge the fact that even the gods could have regrets about their actions, and that, despite their power, Chaos could be defeated through the use of cunning rather than force alone. As a result of the massacre and the subsequent salvation of humanity, Ra, who was feeling exhausted and betrayed, made the decision that he could no longer directly rule the earth. He had witnessed the evil that men could be, and despite the fact that he had saved them, his faith in them had been destroyed. Rather than residing among them, the Sun King made the decision to ascend to the heavens and maintain his rule from there. According to the legend, Ra ascended into the heavens by rising on the back of the celestial cow nut and ascending into the firmament. It was possible for him to continue to watch over humanity from his lofty position. However, he would no longer personally interact with them. Through the establishment of a line of succession that began with his grandson Osiris, he entrusted the responsibility of government to the descendants of Geb and Nut. In Egyptian mythology, the event that served to justify the pharaoh's power and authority was the withdrawal of Ra from the earthly realm. This was a significant event. The spirit and power of Ra flowed through the pharaoh, despite the fact that Ra herself did not rule directly. The pharaoh was not your typical king. He was the incarnation of Horus, the god of the falcon, who after his death transformed into Osiris, the god of the dead. A direct connection between earthly power and divine power was established as a result of this duality. The pharaoh, in his capacity as Horus's representative on earth, was tasked with the most important responsibility of all: the upkeep of Maat, the order of the cosmos. In every instance in which the pharaoh carried out a ceremony, constructed a temple, or issued a law, he was taking part in the same act of creation that Ra carried out each morning. There was a vital connection between the world of humans and the world of the gods, and that connection was the pharaoh. It was not his birth or his military might that gave him legitimacy. Rather, it was his connection to Ra's eternal cycle and his ability to ensure that the chows of Isfet did not prevail. Following the ascent of Ra to the heavens, the earthly reign of the gods was transferred to Osiris, the firstborn child of Geb and Nut at the time. At the same time that he was a king, Osiris was also a civilizer. After his arrival, it is said that humanity existed in a primitive state, barely surviving in the wild. This was before his arrival. Together with his sister and wife, Isis, Osiris made it their mission to alter that situation. In the history of humanity, Osiris was the first teacher. He instructed them in the art of cultivating the land, which was a fundamental task that shifted their way of life from that of nomadic people to that of settled farmers. He instructed them on how to cultivate the land and plant wheat and barley, thereby teaching them the fundamental foundations of civilization. According to the legends, he instructed them on how to construct tools, how to capture the water from the Nile to irrigate the fields, and how to harvest the crops. His instruction included the art of winemaking as well as the brewing of beer, both of which are essential components of Egyptian ritual and daily life. However, Osiris did not merely ensure that they had the means to sustain themselves physically. He also provided them with laws and language, thereby establishing the initial standards of justice and order. As a result of his rule, people learned to revere the gods, live in harmony with one another, and respect existing laws. As a result of his rule being so equitable and prosperous, he was regarded as the model of the ideal monarch. In addition to being a wise and benevolent leader, he was able to win the affection and devotion of his people. Following the completion of Egypt's civilization, Osiris embarked on a journey around the world, bringing with him knowledge and agricultural practices. As a result of his departure, Isis became the regent, and during her reign, there was an unprecedented period of peace and prosperity. It is said that this period of benevolence and order is what is known as the first golden age of humanity, and it was the period that laid the foundation for everything that came after it. Since then, Osiris has come to represent life. The Nile was the sole cause of the growth and order that was able to establish itself. Set, Osiris's younger brother, was filled with a great deal of envy due to his brother's success and popularity. On the other hand, Set was a god of the desert, chows, and violence in contrast to Osiris. Osiris, on the other hand, represented the tranquility and order of the Nile, while Set represented the sweltering heat of the desert and the sandstorm that consumed everything. Set's jealousy eventually developed into a full-blown hatred. According to the most well-known myth concerning the conspiracy, Set was the one who came up with the idea to kill his brother. Gold inlays and precious stones were used to embellish the exquisite chest that he had commissioned to be constructed according to Osiris's precise measurements. The chest was then presented as a gift by Set at a banquet that he had organized in honor of Osiris. He stated that he would give it to the person who was able to fit inside it perfectly. Guests tried the chest one at a time, but none of them were able to fit inside. When it was Osiris's turn, he laid down inside without any malice in his heart. During that precise instant, Set and his minions rushed over to the container and slammed the lid shut, securing it with molten lead. They had the intention of ensuring that the chest and Osiris' body would never be discovered, so they threw it into the Nile River, sending the king and the hope of Egypt downstream during the process. However, that was not the end of Set's plan. The chest was retrieved by Set, the coffin was opened, and 14 pieces of his brother's body were cut into pieces. This was done to ensure that Osiris would not be able to return to the afterlife or find peace there. He dispersed each component across Egypt with the intention that it would never be in a position to be reassembled. Not only was this act of dismemberment a murder, but it was also an act of Isfet, which is a form of pure chaos, and it was an attempt to disrupt the order of the universe. Through the act of tearing Osiris's body into pieces, Set was attempting to destroy the integrity of the king, and by extension, the integrity of the kingdom that Osiris had established. The disintegration of Osiris's body into its component parts served as a reflection of the disintegration of the order that Set had attempted to impose. Osiris's assassination was a catastrophic event that occurred following the dissemination of the information. Isis, who was in a state of desperation and heartbreak, began an unceasing search for the 14 pieces of her cherished husband. An act of betrayal brought an end to the reign of the gods, and with it came the beginning of one of the most emotionally moving sagas in the history of mythology. This saga is a story about love, revenge, and resurrection. A goddess with a broken heart and an iron will refused to accept defeat after the terrible crime that Set committed. The world descended into chaos as a result of Set's actions. In the beginning, Isis, the great sorceress and the goddess of the throne, set out on a journey that was both exhausting and laborious. Her objective was to locate each of the 14 pieces that were missing from the dismembered body of her cherished husband, Osiris. It is said that Isis, after transforming into a kite, which is a bird of prey that represents protection and mourning, could be seen flying over the entirety of Egypt, from the delta to the south. She shed tears as she flew, and the waters of the Nile sprang forth from her tears, filling the canals with the anguish of her loss. She did not embark on this mission by herself. Her sister Nephthys, who was also Set's wife and the goddess of funerary rites and the protector of the home, assisted her in her search. It is interesting to note that she was also Set's wife. Having been horrified by the cruel behavior of her husband, Nephthys took the side of Isis, demonstrating a loyalty that went beyond the bonds of family. In a sequential manner, Isis and Nephthys discovered the components of Osiris. In order to retrieve the fragments that were dispersed across the country, they traveled nationwide. It was decided to construct a shrine or tomb in his honor at each location where they discovered a piece of him. It is because of this that there are a great number of tombs dedicated to Osiris all over Egypt. The penis, which had been partially consumed by a fish in the Nile, was the final piece of the body that was discovered. In spite of the fact that they were unable to retrieve it, Isis was able to produce a clay substitute thanks to the enormous power of her magic. This particular aspect is very important. Although the body was incomplete, the magic that Isis possessed was so potent that it did not make a difference. As a result of this act, she became the epitome of the protective mother and wife, capable of defying even death in order to protect those whom she loved. After the thin fawn pieces of Osiris's body were reassembled, Isis was faced with the next challenge in order to ensure that her husband would be able to live once more, at least for a sufficient amount of time to have a child. Anubis, the god with the head of a jackal, was the son of Nephthys and Osiris, and in this myth, he becomes the patron of funerary rites. She and Nephthys performed a monumental act of magic with the assistance of Anubis. The body of Osiris was put back together by the three gods. After embalming him and wrapping him in bandages, they created the first mummy known to history. It was the first time in history that a person was mummified, a ritual that the Egyptians would continue to perform for millennia in order to ensure that they would have life in the afterlife. After the body had been preserved, Isis, who had reverted to the form of a kite, beat her wings over the mummy, thereby infusing Osiris's body with life. Her marriage to her husband was finally brought to an end as a result of this miraculous occurrence. Isis became the mother of Horus as a result of this miraculous union. It was in the land of the Delta swamps, a hidden place that was protected from Set's evil, that Horus spent his birth, in order for him to mature into a powerful individual who is capable of exacting revenge on his father. Isis chose to raise him in a clandestine manner, away from the gods and his uncle. The life of Osiris, his death, and his temporary resurrection not only serve as the foundation for the myth of the afterlife, but they also justify the right of his son Horus to be the legitimate king of Egypt and to put an end to Set's reign of chows. Horus's birth story is a tale of hope, of order triumphing over chows, and of a mother who fought against the gods and death for her son's future. The story is told from the perspective of Horus being born. As a result of his upbringing in the Delta swamps, Horus was already a young and powerful god who was prepared to take the throne that his father had previously held. There was not a single battle that resolved the conflict over the throne. Rather, it was resolved through a lengthy series of duels, tricks, and trials that lasted for 80 years. This cosmic drama, which is described in the myth of the contenders Horus and Set, was brought before a tribunal of gods that was presided over by Ra. Horus was the representative of Maat, legitimate order, and justice in the courtroom for the tribunal. As the rightful heir of Osiris, the civilizer, he was the rightful heir. On the other hand, Set was supposed to be a representation of Isfet, chaos, and brute force. In light of the fact that he had murdered his brother, he argued that the throne was rightfully his by virtue of conquest. The battles that Horus and Set fought were both extremely brutal and epic. In the course of one of the battles, Set was able to successfully rip out Horus's left eye by using his cunning. A total of 6 pieces of this eye, which is also referred to as the Diet or the Eye of Horus, were ripped apart and thrown into the river. After many years had passed, the god of wisdom, Thoth, was able to retrieve it, put it back together, and then give it back to Horus. This eye that had been repaired turned into a potent amulet, which became a symbol of healing, protection, and completeness. However, intelligence was also used as a weapon in the conflict, so it was not just fought with force itself. A boat race was the setting for a famous episode in which Seth attempted to deceive Horus, in the belief that it would float more effectively than Horus's wooden boat. He constructed a boat out of stone. On the other hand, Set's boat sank without the slightest delay, which the other gods considered to be an absurd failure. During another occasion, Set made an attempt to humiliate Horus in front of the public, but Thoth stepped in and assisted Horus in defending himself by providing him with arguments. At long last, the gods separated themselves. Ra, in particular, had a preference for Set because he recognized the power and significance of Set. Ra was a god of order, but he was also symbolic of the ferocious midday sun, a force that had the potential to cause destruction. Despite the fact that it was dangerous, the Chows of Thirst was a force that was necessary to maintain balance. Isis, on the other hand, did not give up. Through the use of her magic, she was able to exert influence over the gods, even securing Re's support. After being worn down by the conflict, the court made the decision to look for a conclusive resolution. An unwavering god, in his capacity as a mediator and a defender of justice, stood firm in the midst of the mayhem and violence. Thoth, the god of writing, wisdom, and magic among other things. The gods designated Thoth as their scribe, and he was the one who documented the decisions and judgments of the gods. What he did was not that of a simple scribe. Rather, he was the moral arbiter who made sure that truth and fairness were brought to the forefront. Although Horus and Seth were engaged in a conflict, Thoth remained the voice of reason throughout the conflict. It was through his intervention that Set's deceptions were brought to light. Horus's eye was restored, and the divine tribunal was kept in a state of general order. It was his duty to document the testimony and evidence, and he was responsible for ensuring that each and every argument was heard and evaluated in an impartial manner. If this hadn't happened, the trial would have devolved into a fight in the neighborhood. The gods' decisions gained credibility and significance as a result of his presence. Following a dispute that lasted for 8 decades, the tribunal finally arrived at a decision. Ultimately, the odds were stacked in favor of Horus. Horus was the only one who could reign alongside Ma'at, despite the fact that Set represented a necessary power. As well as being the rightful heir, he was also the vengeance of his father. He was the embodiment of order. The defeat of Seth did not result in his destruction. He was assigned a position on Ra's solar barki, where he would continue to fulfill his role as the protector of the sun by engaging in combat with the serpent Apep every night. This demonstrated that Chows could not be eradicated, but rather that it could only be controlled. As a result of Horus's victory, the pharaoh's authority on earth finally gained legitimacy. Horus came to be representative of the concept of a living king. Each new pharaoh, upon ascending to the throne, became the incarnation of Horus, the king who had brought peace and stability to the land. As soon as the pharaoh passed away, he transformed into Osiris, the prince of the underworld. This duality was the foundation upon which the ideal power cycle was built. Order was maintained on earth by the living pharaoh, and order was maintained in the afterlife by the deceased pharaoh. The conflict that took place between Horus and Seth not only resolved a succession issue, but it also became the foundational myth of the political legitimacy of the pharaohs, and an eternal story of the triumph of justice over chaos. The story of Osiris and Horus was not only a fascinating tale, it was also the foundation upon which the political authority of ancient Egypt was built. There was a widespread misconception that the figure of the pharaoh was that of a simple human ruler, an intricate dual theology that established a direct connection between the pharaoh and the gods served as the foundation for Egyptian royalty. Devoid of life. In ancient Egyptian mythology, the pharaoh was believed to be the embodiment of Horus, the falcon god, son of Osiris, and the avenger of his father. In ancient Egypt, Horus was a representation of law and order, as well as legitimate authority. Following his ascension to the throne, the pharaoh took on the name of Horus and was entrusted with the responsibility of preserving Ma'at, which is the eternal equilibrium of the universe. When this occurred, it meant that the pharaoh was the only person who had the ability to communicate directly with the gods and ensure that they were kind. In addition to being responsible for the governance of his people, he was also tasked with the protection of humanity from the forces of Chaos, Ifet, and the guarantee that the cycle of life, which was symbolized by the journey of the sun and the flood of the Nile, would continue without interruption. The legitimacy of the pharaoh was not dependent on inheritance or military power, but rather on this mystical connection. In his role as Horus, the pharaoh served as an intermediary between the divine realm and the earthly realm. However, the pharaoh's divine nature did not cease to exist after his death. After passing away, the king transformed into Osiris, the king of the underworld, and shed his Horus form forever. The elaborate funerary rituals were performed with the primary intention of bringing about this transformation. In the process of assuming the identity of Osiris, the deceased pharaoh not only ensured his position in the afterlife, but also made it possible for his successor, the new pharaoh, to take on the role of Horus, thereby ensuring that order would be maintained. This cycle of the living Horus and the dead Osiris created an unbroken chain of divine power, which justified the monarchy for all of eternity and transformed the pharaoh into a being that will live forever. The death of the pharaoh was not the conclusion of his divine journey. Rather, it was the culmination of that journey. The theology of the pharaoh was not merely a school of thought. There was evidence of it in the form of propaganda, artwork, and monuments. There are numerous examples throughout the history of Egypt that demonstrate how the pharaohs capitalized on these myths in order to justify their authority. Narmer, who is considered by many historians to be the mythical character who brought Egypt together, is an excellent example. An image of him striking an adversary can be found on the main side of the Narmer palette, which is a ceremonial artifact that dates back to approximately 30 Runzund BC. A representation of the god Horus in the form of a falcon perched on a symbol representing Lower Egypt appears above his head, indicating that Horus is presiding over the victory. In a different part of the story, Narmer himself makes an appearance as a powerful bull, which is a representation of the pharaoh's strength. It is impossible to have any doubts about this iconography. The unification of Egypt was not merely a political act. Rather, it was a divine event where Horus Narmer triumphed over Chaos and brought Egypt back together. Another important illustration is the young pharaoh known as Tutankhamun. The significance of his tomb cannot be overstated, despite the fact that he was not a particularly powerful military ruler. 1922 was the year that the tomb was found in its entirety. and it provided us with a window into Egyptian funerary beliefs that had never been seen before. His transformation into Osiris was the sole objective of the mummification rituals, offerings, and elaborate funerary objects that were accompanied by him for the purpose of ensuring his transformation. His identity as a god-king was not only represented by the funerary mask, which featured a serene face and divine attributes, but it also represented him aesthetically. The entirety of the tomb served as a map for his journey to the afterlife, which was necessary for his soul, which consisted of the Ka and the Ba, to join forces with Osiris and continue his life in perpetuity. The tomb of Tutankhamun is the most tangible evidence that the funerary ritual had been more than just a farewell. Rather, it was an essential act of pharaonic theology. In conclusion, the reign of Ramses I, a powerful pharaoh of the New Kingdom, is a demonstration of how propaganda could make use of pharaonic theology. Ramses engaged in combat with the Hittites during the renowned Battle of Kadesh. Even though the battle ended in a draw, Ramses took the opportunity to memorialize in the temples as a victory in every sense of the word. The reliefs that are found inside the Abu Simbel temple depict him engaging in a solo battle against thousands of adversaries, with the assistance of the gods that are directly present. A depiction of him is shown in his chariot, firing arrows while the god Amun-Ra speaks to him in a hushed voice, offering him words of encouragement and power. This is not the story of a human leader. Rather, it is the story of a divine being, an incarnate Horus, who triumphs over the armies of Chaos while being protected by the gods. This propaganda helped to solidify Ramses' position as the god-king on earth. According to the texts, Ramses prayed to Amun when he felt that he was surrounded by his enemies. Amun responded with a cry that said, "I have given you the strength of a god." The ancient Egyptians believed that death was not the end of life, but rather a transition to another form of existence as they passed away. This transition, on the other hand, was not an easy one because their understanding of the self was significantly more complicated than ours. They did not believe in a single soul, but rather in multiple parts that, in order to achieve immortality, had to come together in the afterlife or go their separate ways. Consider the human being to be a piece of the cosmic puzzle. The most essential component was the Ka, which can be thought of as the vital force or energy that animates a person. It was a part of people from the moment they were born and remained with them throughout their entire lives. What made it possible for a person to eat, drink, and live was the letter K. It was the divine spark that maintained the life of a body. A house was necessary for the K after death. It was a place where they could rest and receive offerings. For this reason, tombs and funerary statues were constructed so that the Ka would have a place to call their own permanent home. It was not for the body of the deceased that the food and drink offerings that were left in the tombs were intended to nourish, but rather for the Ka of the next life. After that, there was the Bay, which is a term that can be translated as either the personality or the subconscious. A person's Bay was what set them apart from others. The ability to move freely and to travel between the world of the living and the world of the dead was possessed by it. It was portrayed as a bird with a human head, and because of its mobility, the deceased person was able to travel to the earth during the day and then return to his tomb at night. The significance of mummification was highlighted by the fact that if the Ba was unable to locate its body, it would be lost for all time permanently. The AC was the essential third component of the soul. and it was a representation of the spirit that had been glorified or transformed. It was not acquired at birth. Rather, it was after a successful death and passing the judgment of Osiris that it was obtained. It was only possible for the individual to become an AC if they were deemed to be just a voice. Additionally, his existence ensured that the individual would live forever because he was immortal and timeless. The Egyptians believed in the power of the shadow, which was the dark form of the being, as well as in the Ren, which was the name that contained the essence of identity. These three main components were the most important to the Egyptians. In the event that the name of a person was removed from the annals of history, as was the case with Akhenaten, their existence in the afterlife was in tremendous jeopardy. For the continuation of the being in the afterlife, each of these components was essential to its survival. Consequently, death was a state of disintegration in which these components detached from one another. The purpose of funerary rituals was to bring together all of these components, thereby enabling the individual to continue living forever. Not only was the process of mummification used to preserve the body, but it was also a sacred ritual that was performed with the intention of ensuring that the various components of the soul could be brought back together in the afterlife. In the absence of a complete body, the C was unable to find a place to call home, and the B was unable to recover. The procedure took a total of 70 days. During the ceremonies, the priests acted out their duties while dressed as Anubis, the god with the jackal tail. The removal of the organs occurred as the initial and most important step in the process. An incision was made in the side of the body, and the lungs, liver, intestines, and stomach were removed to complete the surgical procedure. It was decided not to throw away these organs. Rather, they were preserved and placed in canopic jars, each of which had a lid that represented one of the 4 sons of Horus, who were tasked with the responsibility of safeguarding them. The jackal, Dumutev, served as a protector for the stomach. The falcon, Queben, served as a protector for the intestines. The baboon, Hapi, served as a protector for the lungs. Because of Amset, the human, the liver was protected, because the Egyptians believed that the heart was the seat of both the intellect and the emotions, and because it was required for the final judgment. The heart was believed to remain within the body. On the other hand, the brain was removed through the nose using a hook, and it was thrown away because they did not place any significance on it. After that, the next step was to dehydrate. After covering the body with natron, which is a natural salt, it was allowed to dry for a period of 40 days. Because it absorbed all of the moisture, natron was able to prevent decomposition. The body was washed and then anointed with resins and aromatic oils after it had sufficiently dried. A meticulous and ritualistic approach was taken to the wrapping process, for the purpose of providing protection for the deceased while they were traveling. Hundreds of meters of linen were utilized, and amulets and jewelry were positioned in between the layers. The heart scarab, for example, was worn on the chest to ensure that the heart would not testify against the deceased in the final judgment. This was one of the specific purposes that each amulet served. After everything was said and done, the mummy was placed inside of a sarcophagus, and it was prepared to embark on its journey to the underworld, where it would be reunited with its missing parts and live forever. The journey to the afterlife for the soul that had just passed away started in the Duat, which is the Egyptian part of the underworld. This was not a place that remained unchanged, as was the case with the Greek Hades. Rather, it was a vast and ever-changing realm, a kind of reflection of the world on earth that the soul had to navigate. In addition to being divided into 12 hours or regions that corresponded to the sun's nightly journey aboard its solar bark, the soul, it was thought to be the domain of Osiris, the king of the dead. After his Ka and Ba were brought back together, I was in need of a guide in order to navigate this realm. The Book of the Dead was the most important of the funerary texts that were included in this guide. This book was not a book in the traditional sense. Rather, it was a collection of spells, magical formulas, and maps that were written on papyri or on the walls of tomes. The deceased were to be equipped with the knowledge that would enable them to avoid dangers and triumph over challenges before they passed away. During the course of the 12 hours that comprised the duat, the soul was confronted with an infinite number of guardians and obstacles. In addition to lakes of fire, each hour presented its own unique set of challenges. The soul had to travel through bodies of water that were on fire. Using the spells contained in the Book of the Dead, he was able to navigate through the area without being consumed. These monstrous guardians, which include giant snakes and demons, are blocking the paths. In order to appease or threaten the deceased, it was necessary for them to be aware of their names and the appropriate incantations. Regions that are desolate. The duat contained a number of passages that were wastelands that were filled with sand and darkness. These passages required the barki of the soul to be dragged by the deities. It was a constant reminder that life in the afterlife was not earned through death but rather conquered. And the journey through the duat was a constant reminder of this, for the purpose of ensuring that only those who were deserving would achieve immortality. It was a test of knowledge, faith, and morality. In the event that the soul was successful in overcoming the perils posed by the duat, it would have arrived at the pinnacle of its journey, the ultimate judgment. This occurrence took place in the Hall of Two Truths, which was the location where Osiris's tribunal was presiding over the proceedings. 42 divine judges were present in this hall when the deceased person made their appearance. This oath of innocence demonstrated that the deceased had lived a life that was in accordance with the principles of Mat, which are order and truth. The deceased recited the negative confession, which was a list of crimes that he swore he had not committed. Some of the crimes that he swore he had not committed included, "I have not killed," "I have not stolen," and "I have not lied." One of the most important aspects of the trial was the weighing of the heart, which was the heart of the deceased person. The Egyptians believed that the heart was the center of morality and conscience. On the opposite side of a balance, it was positioned. Additionally, the feather of Mat, which was a symbol of truth and justice, was positioned on the opposite side. Anubis, the god with the head of a jackal, was in charge of monitoring the scales, and Thoth, the god with the head of an ibis, was in charge of recording the results of the determination. If the heart of the deceased was as light as a feather, it indicated that they had lived a life of righteousness and were deserving of immortality by virtue of their life. Terror, however, was not too far off. The monstrous creature known as Myth, which had the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, was waiting for him at the base of the scales. In the event that the heart of the deceased, which was burdened by evil, was heavier than the feather, a Myth consumed it for himself. If a Myth were to consume you, it would mean that your existence would be completely eradicated. Due to the fact that the soul was unable to continue its journey and would descend into eternal oblivion, this was the second death, which is considered to be the most terrible of all punishments. In the event that the heart was able to pass the examination, the deceased person was deemed just a voice and granted permission to enter the field of reeds, which was a paradise that was a perfect representation of the Nile and where they would spend eternity in peace. A validation, rather than a punishment, was the result of the judgment, a final test that ensured those who had embraced order and truth were the only ones who could attain eternal life. It was the final stage of an existence that was dedicated to morality. As a result of its intricate rituals, massive sacrifices, and imposing temples, the official religion of the pharaohs and priests frequently appears to be out of reach for the average citizen. In comparison to the life of a farmer on the Nile, the life of a priest at the Temple of Karnak was considerably different. Religion was not practiced in the great monuments by the majority of Egyptians. Rather, it was practiced at home in the fields and in the decisions we made on a daily basis. Popular religion was a belief system that was practical, personal, and intimate, and it was designed to protect the family and ensure prosperity. During the time that the pharaohs and priests were preoccupied with the destiny of the universe and the path that the sun would take, the common people were preoccupied with their own immediate concerns, whether it be the well-being of a child, the guarantee of a secure home, or the accomplishment of a harvest. It was forbidden for them to enter the inner sanctuaries of the temples, which were held exclusively for the clergy and members of the royal family. Instead, they had their own ways of communicating with the divine that they had developed. One of the most fundamental practices was the use of amulets. It was believed by the Egyptians that these small objects, which were believed to be imbued with the power of the gods, could protect them from threat. They came in a wide variety of forms and sizes, ranging from the well-known Udiot, also known as the Eye of Horus, which offered protection against harmful diseases, and the Evil Eye, to the sacred Scarab, which represented the concept of resurrection. These amulets were worn by them in a variety of ways, including being hung around their necks, tied to their arms, or even sewn into their outerwear. It was their magical armor that protected them from the chows and the demons. In addition, statues of gods were frequently found in homes. These were not the stone colossi that are found in temples. Rather, they were small figures made of clay or wood. People would place them on altars in their homes, where they would then make offerings of anything from food and drink to incense. They used these altars as a means of communicating directly with the divine, requesting favors from the gods and paying respect to their ancestors. The relationship between popular theology and the spiritual world was one that was straightforward and pragmatic. Oral tradition and ritual magic were the foundations of this system, rather than intricate sacred texts, which were used to ensure daily survival. While the official theology was dominated by the great gods such as Ra, Osiris, and Isis, ordinary people frequently turned to a pantheon of earthly deities that were more approachable. These gods were specialized in protecting the home and family life. It was Bez and Tauret that were the most well-liked among these. Very strange acts of kissing. A bearded dwarf with a broad face and bulging eyes. He was frequently depicted with a comedic expression and his tongue sticking out. He was also depicted as having a broad face. Even though he had a hideous appearance, he was a fierce protector throughout his entire life. It was believed that he was the god of dancing, music, and having fun. However, the most significant role that he played was that of a protector of the house. Bes was believed by the Egyptians to be able to drive away demons and other evil spirits that might have attempted to enter the house. Additionally, he was the guardian of infants and women who were giving birth. In order to ensure the safety of children, Bes figurines were strategically placed at the entrances of homes or close to the beds of children. Tauret, the goddess who had the body of a hippopotamus, the legs of a lion, and the back of a crocodile, was another of the most important protectors of the home. The figure of Tauret was one of tremendous kindness, despite the fact that she appeared to be intimidating. It was primarily for the purpose of protecting pregnant women and newborns that she was invoked, as her name literally means, the Great One. She was regarded as the most powerful protector by Egyptian women who were exposed to significant dangers during childbirth. It was believed that the placement of amulets and statuettes of Tauret in homes would ensure a safe delivery and the health of both the mother and the child. It was believed that Tauret's ferocious appearance was necessary in order to protect mothers from demons who attempted to steal their children or cause them harm. According to Egyptian mythology, Bes and Tauret were the patron saints of the land. Even though they did not rule the sun or the underworld, people looked to them as the gods they relied on for their day-to-day experiences. The popularity of these figures demonstrates that religion was not a distant affair for the Egyptians, consisting of pharaohs and temples, but rather a system of faith that adapted to their needs, protecting what they considered to be the most sacred things in their lives, their homes and their families. Magic was not a trick performed by illusionists or a supernatural force that was in opposition to nature in the eyes of the ancient Egyptians. The magic that was known as Jika was a fundamental cosmic force that was one of the first things to exist in the universe, even before the gods and before the universe itself. Hik was the power that allowed the gods to make their will manifest, and he was the power that was responsible for creation itself. Instead of considering it to be something supernatural, think of it as a science that studies the universe. The technology was the means by which the gods, and by extension, humans, were able to engage with the universe. According to Egyptian belief, the god Hika was elevated to the status of a deity in his own right and served as Ra's guardian while he traveled through the night. The strength of his power served as the basis for all rituals. Whenever a priest recited an incantation or a physician administered a remedy, they were not requesting a favor. Rather, they were utilizing Jeka's power to manipulate reality. It was a type of knowledge, a kind of physics that was considered sacred. Jika was an essential component in the process of preserving mate, which is the order of the cosmos. Magical rites were performed by the priests in order to guarantee that the sun would rise every morning and that the Nile would be flooded. On an individual level, common people utilized magic as a means of safeguarding themselves against adverse health conditions, malevolent spirits, and the perils of everyday life. Hika was administered through the use of amulets, statuettes, and spells written in medical papyri. Praying to a god was not sufficient on its own. In order to summon its power, one needed to make use of the appropriate means. There was a tool, a way to actively participate in the order of the world, and that tool was magic. Not only were myths traditional tales from the past, but they also served as the basis for everyday life. During each agricultural cycle, the myths and legends surrounding Osiris and the Nile were brought to life and celebrated. In addition to being the Nile was also a manifestation of the god Hapi, who was the god of the flood and was responsible for bringing black silt to the land in order to fertilize it. Every year, at the time when the Nile began to rise, rituals were carried out in order to ensure that the flood would be successful. Hapi, the god of the flood, was called upon by the priests through the recitation of incantations and the offering of sacrifices. Planting seeds was a holy ritual that established a direct connection between farmers and the myth of Osiris. Through the act of burying the seeds in the ground, they were recreating the burial of Osiris, which was the death that was required for life to flourish further. The fact that the seeds germinated and grew into plants was a direct representation of Osiris's resurrection, because of his victory over death and chose. The harvest, on the other hand, was a celebration of the triumph of life and a reformation of order. In order to express their gratitude to Osiris for the abundance, the people had celebrations and presented him with offerings. From the moment of birth until the moment of death, an Egyptian's life was full of rituals. Amulets and the rituals of Bez and Teret were utilized by pregnant women in order to safeguard themselves during the labor and delivery process. In order to safeguard children from the ill effects of the evil eye, magical songs and amulets were utilized. Acts of Jekka included funerary rituals such as mummification and the opening of the mouth ceremony, which was performed to ensure that the soul would be able to partake in food and speech in the afterlife. All of these actions were not simply the fulfillment of traditions. Rather, they were the means by which the Egyptians ensured that the world, from the cosmos to the home, remained in perfect balance. The narrative structure of Egyptian mythology was not rigid. As the balance of political power shifted over the course of history, theology also developed. Syncretism, the process by which local deities merged with the most important ones to create new gods with combined power, was an important phenomenon that occurred during this evolution. The majority of the time, this did not imply that the original gods vanished. Rather, it meant that their identities merged together and bolstered one another. Amun and Ra were brought together during the New Kingdom, which is considered to be the most significant instance of syncretism. The city of Thebes, which was relatively unimportant at the beginning of Egyptian history, was the place where Amun was first worshipped as a local god. It was, however, the rise of the Theban dynasties that brought about a significant increase in his significance. As soon as the pharaohs of Thebes have established their authority over the entirety of Egypt, they have elevated their patron god to the highest position in the pantheon. Instead of removing Ra, the supreme sun god who had ruled for millennia, they merged him with their own god. This was done in order to achieve their goal. In the end, Amun-Ra, the king of the gods, emerged victorious. Not only did this new deity possess the creative and solar power of Ra, but it also possessed the mystery and hidden power of Amun, whose name means the Hidden One. Amun was a solar god who manifested in the invisible air and in creation. It was his main temple at Karnak that became the largest and richest religious complex in the ancient world. His cult traveled throughout the empire and spread throughout the entire empire. In response, the pharaohs declared that they were the sons of Amun-Ra, which served to bolster their legitimacy. It is not true that the union of Ammon and Ra was a singular occurrence. When it came to other deities, the same phenomenon repeated itself. For instance, Tasso-Osiris was a composite deity that combined the god of the Saqqara cemetery, the god of Memphis, and the king of the dead. He was also the creator of Memphis. By doing so, a potent funerary deity was created, one that encompassed the concepts of creation, death, and resurrection. In a similar manner, Sobek combined the sun god with the crocodile god, who was responsible for fertility and fury. The syncretist movement was both a theological and a pragmatic movement. Within the context of a centralized empire, it enabled local deities to continue to hold significance, even as the official religion developed into a more intricate and influential institution. It was a method of incorporating new beliefs and preserving cohesion in a kingdom that was constantly evolving, which exemplifies the fluidity and adaptability of Egyptian theology over the course of several centuries. Pharaoh Akhenaten, who ruled Egypt during the 13th dynasty, was responsible for a significant break in the evolution of the country's theological system. Akhenaten, whose birth name was Amenhotep, made an attempt to impose a religious reform that had never been done before. He proposed an end to the traditional practice of polytheism and the adoption of the worship of a single god, Aten. His successors referred to this revolutionary act as the Amarna heresy because it went against centuries of tradition and was therefore considered to be a revolutionary act. Originally, the solar disk was the god Sat-Atorn, but Akhenaten elevated him to a position of exceptional significance. More than just a manifestation of Ra, Aten was the one and only god who was responsible for the creation of the universe. The belief that the sun's light and heat were the only source of life, and that this power was manifested in the solar disk that was always present in the sky, was the foundation of the Aten cult. In a move that broke the millennia-old tradition that pharaohs were incarnations of Horus and that priests were the only ones who could communicate with the gods, Akhenaten declared himself to be the sole intermediary between Aten and humanity. This reform had significant repercussions for both the political and artistic spheres. According to Akhenaten's orders, the temples of the traditional gods were to be destroyed and their names were to be removed from all monuments. This was especially true for the temple dedicated to Amun-Ra, the powerful god of Thebes. In addition to this, he established a new capital, which he called Amarna, in the middle of a desert away from the centers of religious power. The art of this time period also went through a significant transformation. The style shifted away from representations that were static and formalistic, and instead adopted a style that was more naturalistic and personal. As a reflection of the new theology that centered on the pharaoh's personal connection with his god, the figures of Akhenaten and his family are depicted with elongated heads, bulging bellies, and more realistic features. This is a reflection of the new theology. In spite of the pharaoh's brazenness, his theological revolution occurred for only a short period of time. A number of factors contributed to the failure of the Aten cult to achieve success. Initially, there is the opposition that comes from the priests of Amun-Ra. As a result of Akhenaten's reform, these priests lost their enormous power, wealth, and influence. Furthermore, they vehemently opposed the erasure of the gods from a logical standpoint. Furthermore, Akhenaten attacked not only the beliefs of one of Egypt's most powerful classes, but also the means of subsistence for that class. The second reason was that there was a mismatch between the people and the organization. The Aten cult was a philosophical and abstract system that did not resonate with the traditional beliefs of the general public. It was common practice in traditional religion to worship gods for every facet of daily life. The rituals of Osiris to ensure life in the afterlife, the Bez to protect children, and the Tauret to facilitate childbirth are all examples of these. Aten's cult was devoid of any depth or complexity. In the eyes of the people, Aten was not a god that they could comprehend or with whom they could have direct communication. The fact that only the pharaoh was able to communicate with him caused the masses to feel alienated. Furthermore, the monotheism of Akhenaten led to a profound sense of dread because it denied the existence of the afterlife in the form that it was previously understood. As a result of Natan's excessive focus on his religious reform, he neglected foreign relations and state affairs, which led to the loss of territories and internal chaos. This was the third reason for the instability in the political system. Following his passing, power and stability emerged as the most important factors. His successors, most notably his son Tutankhamun, undid all of the reforms that he originally implemented. In addition to the restoration of the temples dedicated to Amun-Ra, the name of Akhenaten was removed from all of the monuments. It was a form of punishment that, in the minds of the Egyptians, meant the complete annihilation of the pharaoh's being. It was an attempt to erase the pharaoh from history, an attempt by a singular figure to rethink the relationship between power and religion. Akhenaten's experiment was a significant and fascinating historical event. His legacy demonstrated that the beliefs of the people were deeply rooted, and that, for the Egyptians, a diverse and complex pantheon was far more important than a single god. Despite the fact that he was unsuccessful in his goal, his legacy demonstrated that belief systems were deeply rooted. Following the arrival of the Greeks and later the Romans, the Egyptian civilization, as it had been known for more than 3,000 years, was confronted with a transition that was of monumental significance. Alexander the Great's conquest of Egypt in 3032 BC resulted in the establishment of the Ptolemaic dynasty as the ruling body of the Hellenistic kingdom. This event did not mark the end of Egyptian mythology. Rather, it marked the beginning of a fascinating process of cultural and religious syncretism that would give it a new form by bringing together elements from different cultures and religions. Despite the fact that they were Greek, the Ptolemies became aware of the fact that in order to govern such an ancient people, they needed to respect their traditions. Pharaohs such as Ptolemy I and Ptolemy I made public appearances while dressed in the garb of Egyptian pharaohs. They also constructed temples in the traditional style and attempted to combine Greek and Egyptian beliefs. Serapis, one of the most fascinating cults of the time period, originated as a result of the need for cultural cohesion that existed during that time period. A composite deity, Serapis was created with the intention of appealing to both the Greeks and the Egyptians. The sacred bull Apis, which is revered in the Memphis region, was the inspiration for his name, which was a combination of Osiris and Apis. In ancient Egypt, Osiris was a symbol of death and resurrection, while the Apis bull was a representation of fertility and authority. However, Serapis was not merely a god in Egyptian mythology. It was bestowed upon him characteristics that were associated with Greek gods, such as the beard of Zeus, the laurel wreath of Apollo, and the calm and wise face of Asclepius, the god of medicine. There was a clear reference to the Greek Hades in the fact that he was frequently depicted with the three-headed Cerberus at his feet. Egypt served as the sole location for the Acer cult. The Mediterranean region started to see an increase in its popularity. It is a testament to the ability of Egyptian mythology to extend beyond its borders that temples were constructed in his honor in cities such as London, Rome, and Athens. In addition to being a symbol of fertility and prosperity, Serapis was also a symbol of power regarding life and death. Everyone had a sense of familiarity with him because he was a syncretic deity, in spite of the fact that it was dressed in Greek and Roman garb. The Acer cult is a testament to the way in which Egyptian religion adapted and merged. It maintained its core beliefs regarding death and resurrection. It was inevitable that Egyptian mythology would eventually come to an end, despite the popularity of gods such as Serapis. During the rise of the Roman Empire, and more importantly, the Christian religion, the religion of the pharaohs, which had been practiced for millennia, declined in popularity. The Christian monotheism, which placed an emphasis on a single God and salvation through faith, stood in stark contrast to the polytheistic pantheon and the intricate ritual practices that were practiced in Egypt. The Christian emperor's persecution of pagan cults was a devastating blow to the religious community. At the same time that priests were persecuted, temple ceremonies were prohibited. Over the course of thousands of years, the temples, which had served as the epicenter of religious and cultural activity, were either abandoned or converted into churches. The Temple of Philae was the last pagan temple to be shut down, and it occurred in the year 3035 AD. The closure of this temple signified the end of the active religious practice of the ancient Egyptians. However, the decline of religion was accompanied by something even more tragic: the loss of knowledge of hieroglyphs. This led to the decline of religion. Unfortunately, the last Egyptian priests, who were the only ones who were able to read and write hieroglyphs, passed away before they could pass on their knowledge to subsequent generations. It was as if the inscriptions on tombs and temples had become symbols that were incomprehensible, like a language that had died out and no one could understand it. The Egyptian mythology, which had been written on stone and papyrus for millennia, gradually disappeared from the collective memory. It was only preserved in the accounts of Greek and Roman historians, who frequently understood it in a superficial or incorrect manner. When Egypt was no longer the center of a great empire, it was reduced to the status of a province. What happened to its monuments is a mystery. There was sand everywhere in the temples. The locals had lost all recollection of the reasons behind their construction, as well as the meanings of the peculiar symbols that were painted on their walls. The culture, art, and beliefs that had dominated for millennia became a distant memory, a mystery. They were no longer relevant. Over the course of thousands of years, the gods, ranging from Ra to Osiris, were forgotten, and they waited in the shadows for someone to unearth and decipher their legacy. Over the course of more than 1,000 years, the mythology and history of the ancient Egyptians remained shrouded in mystery. The knowledge of hieroglyphs was completely lost, and the imposing monuments became a mystery that could not be solved. The Rosetta Stone was discovered in 917, which brought about a significant change in all of that. While Napoleon was conducting his campaign in Egypt, the discovery was made by accident. Pierre Francois Bouchard, a French soldier, discovered a slab of black granodiorite while he was working on the demolition of an ancient fortress in the Nile Delta. The fortress was located close to the city of Rashid Rosetta. It was not the stone's beauty that made it remarkable. Rather, it was the inscriptions therein. The same text was written in 3 different scripts, and it was all contained within it. The top section was written in Egyptian hieroglyphs. The middle section was written in ancient Greek, and the bottom section was written in Demotic, which is a cursive Egyptian script. Almost immediately, the value of the stone was recognized without delay. In the year 1906 BC, the Greek text was a decree issued by the priests in honor of King Ptolemy V. Specifically, this decree stated that the text was written in all 3 scripts, which was the most important aspect. There was a dictionary available to scholars for the first time in centuries, which allowed them to decipher the language of the pharaohs. All things considered, it was not that easy. Despite the fact that numerous academics from all over Europe attempted to decipher it, the process was laborious and time-consuming. It was a French genius named Jean-François Champollion who was responsible for the most significant breakthrough that occurred in the late 1920s. Champollion had the brilliant idea that hieroglyphs were a mixed system that combined logographic symbols with phonetic sounds. This was in contrast to his contemporaries, who believed that hieroglyphs were purely symbolic. Champollion concentrated his attention on the royal names that were engraved on the stone and were surrounded by a cartouche, which is a type of elongated circle. He was able to make the connection between the hieroglyphs contained within Ptolemy's cartouche and Greek letters by utilizing his extensive knowledge of the Coptic language, which is the last descendant of the ancient Egyptian writing system. He then confirmed his theory by applying his method to other cartouches, such as Cleopatra's, and his findings were consistent. At long last, in the year 1822, he wrote a letter to the French Academy in which he revealed his discovery to the entire world. All of the effort had been rewarding. The information that had been lost for more than 1,000 years had been retrieved, and ancient Egypt, including its mythology, its history, and its culture, could at long last reveal its culture and mythology. It was not only an archaeological discovery that led to the rebirth of Egyptology, but the Rosetta Stone was also the catalyst for this rebirth. The pharaonic tombs provided us with the hearts of the ancient Egyptians, just as the Rosetta Stone provided us with the voice of the ancient Egyptians. Not only did the unearthing of intact tombs lead to the discovery of treasures, but it also permitted us to gain a direct insight into the beliefs that people held regarding death and the afterlife. The tomb of the young king Tutankhamun is, without a doubt, the most prominent illustration of this phenomenon. Over the course of several centuries, the majority of pharaohs' tombs had been looted prior to 1922. Constructing funerary beliefs from fragments was a task that archaeologists had to undertake. On the other hand, Howard Carter found Tutankhamun's tomb in the Valley of the Kings, and it was almost entirely intact. When he made his discovery, it was more than just an archaeological find. This was a major eye-opener. The funerary ensemble that Tutankhamun had arranged for himself was not merely a collection of valuable items. There was a ritual purpose and a symbolic meaning associated with each item. The funerary mask, which was made of pure gold and weighed more than 10 kilograms, was more than just a piece of art. It was believed that the pharaoh, after his death, transformed into one of the forms of the funerary deity, which granted him the ability to communicate with the Masha. Tutankhamun's body had been meticulously mummified and wrapped in bandages before being placed inside the sarcophagus. This was done to ensure that his soul, which consisted of the Ka and the Ba, could recognize his body and continue to live for all of eternity. A significant role was also played by the items that surrounded the sarcophagus. In accordance with the ancient text, canopic jars were discovered that contained his internal organs and were guarded by the 4 sons of Horus. Additionally, there were amulets, jewelry, and statuettes of gods, each of which contained a unique spell that was intended to protect the king while he traveled through the Dut. Scenes from the Book of the Dead, which was a map of the underworld, were carved into the sarcophagus itself. This map was intended to provide the pharaoh with the knowledge necessary to face the dangers and demons that he would encounter on his journey to the final judgment. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb not only validated the myths that Egyptologists had been deciphering from the Rosetta Stone and other papyri, but it also provided context for those myths. It demonstrated to us that beliefs regarding the afterlife were not merely superstitions, but rather a system of faith that was manifested in every object, every ritual, and every inscription. The discoveries that were made in tomes such as his gave us the opportunity to gain a first-hand understanding of the intricate nature of funerary rituals, the significance of mummification, and the Egyptians' profound desire to live forever not as ghosts, but as glorified beings who had triumphed over death. Not only was Egyptian art a form of decoration, but it also served as a language of ritual and symbolism. Whether it was a painting or a relief, every single image, every single color, and every single gesture contained a profound meaning that was intended to preserve Ma'at, the cosmic order. In contrast to modern art, which strives for originality, Egyptian art was concerned with achieving permanence and clarity. There is no better illustration of this than hieroglyphs. In addition to being a form of writing, they were also living images that possessed the ability to produce magical effects. When translated from Greek, the word hieroglyphic means sacred writing. In addition, the Egyptians held the belief that various symbols possessed the ability to bring the words that they represented to life. A funerary spell that was written on the wall of a tomb was not only read, but it was also activated when it was written there. The reason for this is that animals were frequently depicted holding a knife. Not only was the iconography of the gods important, but it was also essential for neutralizing their power and ensuring that they did not cause harm to the deceased in the afterlife. In order to symbolize the characteristics that they possessed, the Egyptian gods were frequently depicted with animal heads. As an illustration, Horus, the god of the sky and the pharaohs, was the one who possessed the head of a falcon. The power that he possessed and his connection to the sun were both symbolized by this animal that soars throughout the heavens. It was said that the head of the god of mummification, Anubis, was that of a jackal, because jackals were scavengers that roamed the desert cemeteries. They became symbols of death and the rituals that are performed during funerals. An ibis was the head of the god of thought, who was also the god of writing and wisdom. This bird, which was discovered in the marshes of the Nile, was thought to be wise and erudite due to the methodical behavior that it displayed. There was also a symbolic power associated with colors. The colors green and black were associated with the fertility and rebirth of the Nile, while the colors red and white were representative of the desert and chows. When it came to comprehending a complicated cosmology, every single detail in a piece of art was essential. Horus is a god in the Egyptian pantheon that is considered to be among the most significant and complicated. This is not a coincidence. His iconography depicts him either as a falcon or as a man with the head of a falcon. The sun and the moon served as the eyes of the falcon, which was considered to be the lord of the sky. As was previously brought to our attention, the myth of Horus is a celebration of the triumph of order over chaos. Through his birth and the struggle he engaged in against his uncle Seth, he was able to establish himself as the rightful heir to his father, Osiris. Not only is this story a story of vengeance, but it is also the story that laid the groundwork for the pharaonic monarchy. It was believed that the pharaoh was the earthly manifestation of Horus, the god who ruled over the world of the living during his lifetime. Not his ancestry, but rather his connection to the divine was the source of his power at the time. The Eye of Horus, also referred to as the Udiet, is one of the most distinctive symbols that are associated with ancient Egypt. Thoth miraculously repaired it after Set had torn it apart in the course of the battle. After the eye was repaired, it was transformed into a potent amulet, which became a symbol of protection, healing, and regeneration. Within the pantheon of Egyptian deities, the influence of Horus extended far beyond the realms of government and royalty. In addition to being a god of battle and the home, he was also a symbol of power and expertise. In addition, because he was considered to be a guardian of children, he was invoked to protect them from illness. The essence of Horus was that he was the personification of order and justice in all of their manifestations. The figure of Anubis, who has a head that is unmistakably that of a jackal, is responsible for guarding cemeteries and is also the god of death. However, his function extends much further than that. Jackals were naturally occurring predators that roamed the desert necropolises, which led to a direct association between them and the concepts of death and decay. Anubis, on the other hand, was supposed to be a terrifying figure. However, he was actually a beneficent deity who guided and protected the deceased. The role of being the inventor of mummification was the most significant one he played. According to the myth, he assisted Isis in embalming Osiris, thereby transforming the dismembered body of his father into the first mummy. His role as the patron of all funerary rituals was established as a result of this act. In order to invoke the protective power of Anubis, the priests who performed the mummification wore the jackal mask of Anubis before the process. When it came time for the final judgment, Anubis played a significant part. He was in charge of directing the soul of the deceased to the Hall of Two Truths and of supervising the process of weighing the heart against the feather of Ma'at. Having him present ensured that the trial would be conducted in a fair and impartial manner. Following the conclusion of the judgment, Anubis accompanied the soul to its ultimate destination, which was the field of reeds. According to this interpretation, Anubis was not a god of death, but rather a god of transition who made it possible for people to continue living in the afterlife. Thoth, who was known for his ibis or baboon head, was considered to be the personification of magic, writing, and wisdom. Some people believed that the ibis, a bird that lived in marshes and fed on them, was a wise and meditative creature. Baboons, on the other hand, were thought to be intelligent and were frequently seen first thing in the morning, which established a connection between them and the solar rebirth. Known as the scribe of the gods, Thoth was the individual responsible for recording all of the events, divine decrees, and court decisions. He served as the mediator during the trial of Horus and Set, and he made certain that the disagreement was settled in a fair manner by the humans who made the final decision. The outcome of the weighing of the heart was recorded by him, and he was the one who determined whether or not a soul was deserving of eternal life. But Thoth was not merely a recorder. He was much more than that. The fact that he was credited with the invention of hieroglyphs made him the master of magic. This was due to the fact that the written word had the ability to bring life into existence. In Egyptian society, scribes were considered to be one of the most respected classes, and he was the patron of it. It was believed that he was the author of ancient texts on astronomy, medicine, and magic. In addition, he was the god of the moon, the calendar, and scientific knowledge. The voice of reason, the intellectual order, and the magic that gave the universe its coherence were all aspects of thought that were fundamental to its nature. His figure was the perfect complement to the power of Horus and the protection of Anubis, bringing the cycle of governance, life, death, and knowledge to a successful conclusion. Magic was not a trick performed by illusionists, nor was it a force that was in opposition to the natural world in the eyes of the ancient Egyptians. Heka was a fundamental cosmic force, a vital energy that had been around since the beginning of time. It was Heka. Heka was the energy that enabled the Creator God to conceive of the universe, and the other gods to make their willful desires manifest. It was the source of the power that gave creation its power. It was not a superstition, but rather a form of sacred physics that was being discussed. That the idea of Jekka was so significant that it was given its own god, the god Jekka, was a manifestation of its significance. It was common practice to depict him with the head of a ram, which is a symbol of virility and power. He was tasked with the responsibility of guarding the sun god Ra as he traversed the treacherous underworld known as the Duat on a nightly basis. The power that he possessed was what prevented the Chow's serpent, Apophis, from escaping. The Egyptians held the belief that Heka was the driving force behind the universe. It was not enough to simply pray. Rituals were actions that harnessed that energy in order to have an effect on the universe. In the act of reciting an incantation or administering a remedy, a priest or a physician was not requesting a favor. Rather, they were utilizing the power of Heka, a form of knowledge. It was a technology that enabled the maintenance of Mat, the cosmic order, and it was utilized for a variety of purposes, including the protection of individuals, the treatment of illnesses, and the promotion of crop and agricultural success. The practice of magic was an important instrument, a way to actively participate in the order of the world. In a world ruled by Jekka, priests were not only respected figures in the religious community, but they were also highly knowledgeable in the field of magic. Frequently, they were referred to as priest-ridders. In addition to being the keepers of rituals, formulas, and incantations, these individuals were also the keepers of sacred knowledge. They played an important part in the society. The priests of the great temples, such as those of Amun-Ra at Karnak, carried out daily rituals to ensure that the sun rose, the Nile flooded, and the order of the cosmos was preserved. These rituals were performed at the macro level. They knew how to honor the gods, what offerings to make, and what words of power to recite. They were the ones who knew how to do all of these things. At the level of the individual, the priest or priest-magician was an important figure in the lives of the members of the general populace. The physicians, the healers, and the exorcists were all of them. They were able to diagnose and treat illnesses by utilizing their knowledge of Heka, frequently through the use of incantations and amulets. This is evidenced by the fact that medical inscriptions from the time period demonstrate that they combined magic and practical medicine. A spell that was intended to heal a wound, for instance, was not merely a prayer, but rather an act to stop the flow of blood. This was a form of magic that imitated a divine act in order to accomplish a set of goals. One of the most important aspects of their power was their familiarity with hieroglyphs. The Egyptians held the belief that hieroglyphic symbols possessed a life of their own, and the priest, through the use of a spell, brought these symbols to life. As the intermediary who made certain that the power of Heka was always put to use for the sake of order and life, the priest-magician served as the bridge between mortals and the gods. Even before the Book of the Dead or the tomb paintings in the Valley of the Kings were created, the pharaohs were already making preparations for the afterlife. The pyramid texts, which were carved into the walls of the pyramids that were built by the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom, consist of the oldest and most mysterious evidence of these beliefs, rather than being books in the traditional sense. These were collections of spells and magical formulas that were written down in the corridors and burial chambers of the building. They had a straightforward but essential goal in mind: helping the deceased pharaoh finish his transition and become an Ach, which is a glorified spirit that lives among the gods. Is the purpose of this purpose. During the journey to the afterlife, the pyramid texts served as the pharaoh's authoritative guide. They were crafted with the intention of ensuring that the king triumphed over all challenges, became one with the gods, and became one with the infinite stars that adorned the night sky. These texts reflect a much more exclusive perspective on the afterlife, in contrast to later beliefs that promised immortality to all individuals. The pharaoh was the only person who could take advantage of the privilege of immortality, according to this early view. A number of specific instructions were included in the texts, including the names of the guardians of the underworld, as well as the words of power that could be used to open doors and overcome dangers. The concept of the afterlife that was presented in these texts was very dissimilar to what is understood in modern times. One of the most important aspects of the pyramid texts was the ascent to heaven, whereas the Book of the Dead was primarily concerned with the judgment of Osiris. It was possible to cast spells that would cause the pharaoh to transform into a bird or an insect and journey through the sky with the gods. There were other texts that provided him with instructions on how to join Ra in his solar bark, or how to take his place among the circumpolar stars, which are considered to be a place of eternal life. The judging of souls was not mentioned at any point in the debate. In accordance with his divine nature, the pharaoh was able to gain direct access to heaven. The foundation of all Egyptian funerary literature is comprised of these texts, which are characterized by their poetic and frequently cryptic language. The ideas of the Ka and the Ba were already in existence, and the rituals of mummification, which were still in their infancy at the time, were designed to guarantee that the body of the pharaoh was prepared for resurrection. The pyramid texts are evidence that Egyptian civilization was deeply rooted in the concept that death was merely a gateway to eternal life, and that this was the ultimate goal of existence from the very beginning of its existence. In the aftermath of the collapse of the Old Kingdom, the power of the pharaoh diminished, while the authority of regional rulers increased. Theologically speaking, this political change brought about a significant shift in perspective. In the past, the king was the only person who could receive eternal life. However, this privilege was now extended to members of the nobility and high-ranking officials. It was once a royal monopoly, but now the knowledge and rituals for the afterlife have been made available to civilians. The texts found on the sarcophagus clearly demonstrate this change. As the name of these texts suggests, they were inscriptions that were painted or engraved on the wooden coffins that were commonly used by the Egyptian elite. On the other hand, in contrast to the pyramid texts that were discovered inside stone tombs, these spells were written directly on the coffin, which made them more accessible to prominent individuals. The majority of the spells were direct copies of earlier texts. However, there were also new spells and formulas that reflected a more comprehensive and practical perspective on the afterlife. Because they were accessible to anyone who had the financial means to purchase them, these texts helped to democratize immortality. The pharaoh was no longer the only person who could indulge in this privilege. On the other hand, the afterlife that was described was significantly more specific and packed with perils. These texts provided a more practical and functional guide for the soul of the deceased, in contrast to the pyramid texts, which focused on the ascent to the sky. The coffin texts, on the other hand, were centered on life in the underworld, also known as the Dut. There were spells for everything, including the ability to protect against hunger and thirst, to protect against snakes and demons, to avoid having to work in the afterlife thanks to magical statues known as Eusebius, and to transform into sacred animals in order to avoid danger. The journey to the afterlife evolved into a more personal challenge, one in which the deceased required knowledge in order to triumph over challenges on their own after death. The idea that the deceased could be punished if they did not possess the appropriate spells was already present in these texts, despite the fact that the judgment of Osiris was not the primary focus of these texts. The destiny of the soul was no longer dependent on the divinity of the pharaoh. Rather, it was dependent on the individual's magical knowledge and, of course, their wealth, which enabled them to purchase the texts and magical objects. What had begun as a privilege reserved solely for the pharaohs in the pyramid texts then spread to the nobility in the coffin texts, and finally culminated in the Book of the Dead. Magic and the knowledge of eternal life became even more accessible over the course of several centuries. This piece of Egyptian funerary literature is widely considered to be the most well-known and democratic variation. Unlike the books that we are familiar with today, the Book of the Dead was not bound in any way. Papyrus scrolls, mummy bandages, and tomb walls were all used to write the approximately 200 individual spells that were included in this collection. Any individual's requirements, and more importantly, their financial constraints, could be accommodated by it. In light of this, it was possible for any Egyptian citizen who possessed the financial means to purchase a papyrus and a scribe to acquire immortality. It was intended to serve the same purpose as the earlier texts, which was to act as a travel guide for the soul of the person who had lost their life. The soul was able to navigate the perils of the underworld with the assistance of each spell, which served a specific purpose. There were spells in the Dut that could be used to open doors, protect against demons, transform into sacred animals, and gain access to the food and water that the deceased would require after they had passed away. Nevertheless, the emphasis placed on the final judgment is the central theme of the Book of the Dead, and it is this theme that distinguishes it from its predecessors. This book depicts the culmination of the journey of the soul, which took place in the Hall of Two Truths. It was there that the heart of the deceased was weighed against the feather of Maat. Assuming that the heart was as light as the feather, the soul would remain in the field of reeds for all of eternity. In the event that it was heavier, the monster Amit would consume the heart, and the soul would then pass away in its second and final moment of death. The deceased were able to obtain the spells they required from the Book of the Dead in order to guarantee that their heart would not testify against them and that the trial would result in a favorable outcome. An instruction manual for all of eternity, it was the culmination of everything. We do not understand Egyptian art to be merely a form of decoration or a means of personal expression in the same way that we do today. It served a fundamental purpose and was performed as a ritual. The ancient Egyptians believed that art was a device of magic, a form of hika that had the ability to bring about the manifestation of reality. Not only did each statue, relief, or painting depict an object or scene, but it also bestowed upon it the ability to sustain itself for all of eternity. The food offering that was depicted in a drawing of a tomb was more than just a memento. The belief was that the offering would materialize in the afterlife in order to provide sustenance to the K, which is the soul of the person who had passed away. As a result of their faith in the transformative potential of art, the Egyptians were known for their meticulous approach to style. Realism was not the goal of art. Rather, it sought clarity and permanence. It was a strict canon that was followed when depicting figures. The head was shown in profile. The eye was shown facing forward. The shoulders and chest were shown facing forward, and the rest of the body was shown in profile. This perspective, which was not naturalistic, made certain that all of the essential body parts were depicted, thereby ensuring that they would continue to function properly in the afterlife. For instance, funerary sculpture was not a portrait, but rather a spare body for the Ka, serving as a backup in the event that the mummy was destroyed. The connection between the Egyptian gods and animals was not a choice made at random due to artistic considerations. Rather, it was a reflection of the Egyptians' mythology and their perspective on the natural world. There were characteristics and behaviors that animals possessed that made them ideal representations of supernatural qualities. This is Anubis, the jackal. The depiction of Anubis with the head of a jackal was done for a very practical reason. The cemeteries in the desert were frequented by jackals and wild dogs. The Egyptians did not consider these creatures to be dangerous. Rather, they connected them with death and the afterlife. As a result, the jackal evolved into a guardian of the necropolises, performing the functions of a guide and protector for the deceased. The falcon name is Osiris, one of the birds that could fly at the highest altitudes and observe the world from above. The falcon was considered to be the lord of the sky itself. It was for this reason that Horus was depicted with the head of a falcon. It was believed that he was the god of the sun and the sky, and his figure was said to represent the power of the pharaohs. According to the legend, his eyes were the sun and the moon, which represented the ongoing cycle of light and darkness that occurs each day. It is Thoth on the ibis. The ibis, a bird with a long bill that was discovered in the marshes of the Nile, was thought to be a highly intelligent and solitary creature. Because of its introspective and methodical behavior, it became the emblem of thought, the god of writing, magic, and wisdom that it represents. In addition, thought was portrayed as a baboon, which is another animal that is well known for its intelligence. The use of animal symbolism was a form of visual language that was able to instantaneously communicate the essence of the gods. They were not merely the manifestation of their powers in the natural world. Rather, they were the costumes themselves. Magic was not merely a theoretical concept for the ancient Egyptians. Rather, it was a dynamic force that was present in their everyday lives. They were the most common objects of power that people used to harness that force known as Heka. Amulets were most commonly used. These talismans were not merely ornaments. Rather, they were magical talismans that safeguarded the wearer from harm and ensured their well-being in both this life and the next. The Uat, also known as the Eye of Horus, is without a doubt the most well-known amulet. According to the myth, Horus's left eye was severed by his uncle Seth, but through the intervention of the god Thoth, it was then repaired. This is the reason why the Udjat was a symbol of healing, completeness, and protection against the evil eye and envy throughout history. In life, it was used to protect those who were still alive, and it was placed on mummies to ensure that they would regenerate in the afterlife. The scarab, on the other hand, was a potent amulet that possessed the ability to regenerate and rebirth. During their observations, the Egyptians noticed that the dung beetle would push balls of dung in order to lay its eggs. They interpreted this behavior as a reflection of the god Khepri's daily act of pushing the sun across the sky. Both the daily cycle of the sun and the concept of resurrection were represented by the scarab. To ensure that the deceased would be regenerated in the afterlife, overcoming death and being reborn as an AC, a glorified spirit. Scarab-shaped amulets were placed on the hearts of mummies. This was done to ensure that the deceased survived death. In addition to being an important amulet, the Djed pillar was also considered to be Osiris' strongest support. Osiris's ability to triumph over death was represented by this object, which also served as a symbol of stability and durability. It was customary to hold the raising of the Djed ceremony on an annual basis in order to commemorate the resuscitation of Osiris and the revitalization of the pharaoh's authority. Within the context of the mummification ceremony, the organs of the deceased were not discarded. The Egyptians held the belief that these organs were necessary for people to continue living in the afterlife. Therefore, they were extracted, preserved, and placed in canopic jars, which are specialized containers for containers of this kind. Similar to the body, these vessels, which were typically made of alabaster or limestone, were stored in the sarcophagus alongside the deceased. Every one of the 4 canopic jars had a lid that was fashioned in the form of one of the 4 sons of Horus, who were responsible for providing protection. Every single one of them was in charge of a vital organ that was thought to be essential for the deceased person in the afterlife. It was necessary to keep the lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines contained within the vessels. Due to the fact that it was essential for the ultimate decision, the heart was not removed from the body. The liver was protected by Amset, who had the head of a human. Greetings, with the head of a baboon, the lungs were protected. As the protector of the stomach, Duamutev, who had the head of a jackal, performed his duties. Intestinal protection was provided by Kevenuev, which had the head of a falcon. Mythology, science, and ritual were all intricately intertwined, and canopic jars were a clear illustration of this correlation. The ancient Egyptians were aware of the significance of maintaining one's physical appearance in order to achieve immortality. The vessels and the divine guardians who guarded them made certain that the deceased were provided with everything they required to successfully complete their journey through the underworld and ultimately reside in the field of reeds for all of eternity. It took some time for the myths that were prevalent among the ancient Egyptians to vanish. The alternative was that they merged and took their last breath before being replaced by new beliefs. Syncretism is the term used to describe this process, which became apparent with the arrival of the Greeks and Romans. With the arrival of Alexander the Great and the establishment of the Ptolemaic dynasty, the Greek rulers looked for a way to bring together their Egyptian and Hellenic subjects. Both of these events occurred simultaneously. The Egyptian gods Osiris and Apis were combined with elements of the Greek gods Zeus and Hades to create the cult of Serapis, which was a deity that was created by them. The Egyptians were familiar with him because of his connection to the underworld and fertility, despite the fact that he was depicted with a beard in the style of Greek literature. It is a testament to the malleability and adaptability of Egyptian mythology that the cult of Serapis spread throughout the Mediterranean region. Nevertheless, the fusion was not able to withstand the passage of time. This was the final blow that was dealt by the power of the Roman Empire, which was followed by the imposition of Christianity. Cults that practiced paganism were prohibited. Additionally, the knowledge of hieroglyphs was lost as a result of the conversion of the temples into churches. Both the myth and the gods gradually disappeared into oblivion over the course of time, as if the sands of the desert had obliterated every trace of their existence. Over a period of more than 100 years, the tale of the gods and pharaohs remained unspoken, a mystery that could not be solved. Inscriptions on the walls of the pyramids and temples were completely devoid of any significance, and they stood like the specters of a civilization that had long since vanished. However, fate had other things in store for us. The Rosetta Stone was found in Nansendindin, which marked the beginning of the modern era's rediscovery of ancient Egypt. This discovery was made solely by chance. This slab, which contained the same text written in hieroglyphs, Demotic and Greek, was the key that enabled Jean-Francois Champollion to decipher the language that was used by the pharaohs. Voices from the past were heard once more for the very first time in the annals of history. The findings of intact tomes, such as the one belonging to the boy pharaoh Tutankhamun, provided verifiable evidence of the events described in the texts. This was not a collection of fanciful tales. Rather, it was a multifaceted and pragmatic belief system that provided significance to both life and death. As a result, the history of the Egyptians serves to remind us that great civilizations are not solely defined by the things that they construct. Rather, they are defined by the stories that they tell in order to provide meaning to human existence and to guide us through life, death, and the afterlife. Their legacy, which has been reclaimed, extends an invitation to us to take one final trip down the Nile. This is a journey through a world of myths that, much like the pyramids, refuse to be forgotten. Egyptian mythology did not remain buried in the sands of time over the course of history. Its fascination with life, death, and the afterlife has made it an unending source of inspiration for modern culture. From Hollywood cinema to video games and literature, This fascination has made it an excellent source of inspiration. Her legacy will live on forever, just like her gods. The mummy's curse and the figure of the pharaoh have each developed into their own distinct subgenres within the film industry. Movies like The Mummy 1932 and its adaptations that were released more recently, in spite of the fact that they frequently manipulate myths for the purpose of entertainment. They have been responsible for popularizing gods such as Anubis and making mummification one of the most recognizable images of ancient times. The story of Osiris's resurrection and Horus's vengeance is an example of a narrative archetype that has been told numerous times over the course of history. Both science fiction and fantasy have been influenced by mythology in the world of literature. Authors such as Rick Riordan, who is responsible for the Kane Chronicles, have given myths a new lease on life for a new generation of readers. The gods and demons of ancient Egypt are depicted in these books as they confront the difficulties of the modern world. In fantasy literature, the concept of a journey to the underworld, also known as the Duat, continues to function as a recurrent motif. This rich source has also been utilized in the creation of video games. Not only do many video game franchises, such as Assassin's Creed Origins, recreate Egyptian monuments with an incredible level of detail, but they also incorporate the gods and the beliefs that they hold into their gameplay. As the player explores the temples of Amun-Ra, they will have the opportunity to observe how people utilized their faith in their day-to-day lives. Playing card games such as Yu-Gi-Oh!, a nod to the fact that the Egyptian gods are considered to be the most powerful deities in the game, have even made them the most powerful cards in the game. Artists from all over the world have begun to incorporate Egyptian iconography into their contemporary works of art. The pyramids and sarcophagi continue to be symbols of power and mystery, while the Eye of Horus has evolved into a symbol of protection and mysticism. The ability of ancient Egypt to provide a coherent and comprehensive representation of the universe, in which every action, every ritual, and every image serves a cosmic purpose, is the source of the country's fascination. The Nile and its myths continued to provide modern culture with a source of wisdom and an inspiration to investigate the profound questions of life, death, and destiny. This is true despite the fact that modern culture is now separated by a significant amount of time. In the event that the journey through Egyptian mythology has been lengthy, it is due to the fact that the history of the Egyptians was not merely a straightforward story of gods and heroes. It was a comprehensive system, a method of comprehending life that was constructed with the same level of attention to detail as religious structures such as pyramids and temples. In spite of the fact that it is simple to observe the ruins and admire the architecture, the Egyptians' true masterpiece was the universe that they conceived of in their minds, which they considered to be a treasured cosmos. Not only did this civilization construct monuments that will stand the test of time, but it also crafted a mythology that would direct its souls toward it. Death was not a macabre fixation for them. Rather, it was a profound conviction that life was just the beginning of a journey that they were looking forward to. We see the constant search for purpose and beauty in a world that was always on the brink of chaos in the Nile, in the cycle of the sun, and in the stories of Osiris. These are all things that we take into consideration at the conclusion of this extensive journey. The only thing that is left is the image of a culture that was able to bring the divine and the earthly into harmony with one another. They were aware of the fact that a river could be a god, that a pharaoh could be the personification of justice, and that the fate of a soul could be determined by a heart when it was weighed against a feather. While you were listening to some interesting history, I hope that you found this story to be enjoyable and that it helped you relax. If you found the narrative to be enjoyable, please support it by giving it a like and subscribing to this community of cultured individuals. I am appreciative of your hearing. Until we embark on our next journey,